Burton leaned against the wall with one hand, his mouth smoking, his lips moving as he said, "It's past midnight. You haven't even gone to bed yet. You're running to this small alley to kill people. It's so noisy that it makes other people unable to rest." Burton's eyes glanced at the two people over there. "Do you have any manners?" Barbar propped his staff on the ground, hands on hips, looked at Burton and said, "What the hell? Does it have anything to do with me whether you sleep or not? On the contrary, it's because of this reason that you ran out to disturb the old man who was interested in killing people. Are you tired of living?" Clara also turned her head to look at Burton. Barbar's face was upset. He glanced at Burton and asked, "Let me ask you, who are you?" Quote. Burton took out a cigarette from his mouth and said, "Nobody." He stood in a super cool way, one hand in his pocket and the other holding a cigarette, his face in the dark, and said, "Just a hunter wandering alone." Parva Rostilo was pressed to the ground by Clara, hearing that and thinking to himself, "Lone hunter." Barbar opened his mouth, then he laughed loudly. He touched his face and said, "This is so funny. All the solo hunters have come here. Are you here to make fun of me? Solo hunters are just small characters in the border area world but can't move around in organizations." He looked at Burton and continued to provoke. "What can you do as a solo hunter? You can't do anything as a solo hunter." Burton heard that, blew out cigarette smoke, smiled and said, "The organization, the #1 hunter organization in Nuojin City. Except for the emerging spider. Only the white wolf is dying. Right?" Barbar glanced at it, looking at Burton. Burton standing in the rain of lingering cigarette smoke. Burton holding a cigarette in his fingers said the smell of animal blood cannot be hidden all over the body. Combined with this arrogant attitude, it looks like you are the hunter of the white wolf. Burton said, "Looking directly like this is truly a legend. I can only admire it." Burton looked at Barbar appraising ly, two panic-level veterans failed to surround two abnormal-level rookies. It was truly eye-opening. Barbar's hand clenched the staff and asked, "What do you mean? You came here to find fault, right?" Burton stood still, looked at them and said, No, I just came here to confirm something. If I want to make this noise source quiet again." Burton said as if it was obvious, "I was comparing which side should be slaughtered a little faster. But right now it seems like there's no need to choose anymore." Barbar gritted his teeth and said, "Great. You really didn't come to find fault. !" Quote. Barbar was angry, eyes widened and shouted, "But you came here to find death." Barbar's feet stomped on the ground, holding his staff, and rushed towards Burton. Burton leisurely snapped the text. The cigarette fell out of my hand. He was extremely quick to dodge Barbar's staff. Barbar gritted his teeth and said, "That's easy to say. It's not like I can't stand it." But Barbar's eyes widened. He said, "Huh, only saw a cigarette where he had just hit it hard." Clara on this side was even more bewildered. She was startled. "Huh." A pair of hands grabbed her mouth. A light flashed in her brain as if something was choking her. Clara glared and thought to herself, "Huh. What happened? What did we do? I feel like my head is dizzy." Clara was knocked unconscious. Burton looked at the girl lying on the ground. Burton asked, "Answer me. Who is the little girl who chased the white wolf? Why is it like that?" Parva Rostilo's face was bleeding and he looked at Burton and said, "I'm a new recruit in Spider's #1 fighting team. My name is Parva Rostilo. Anyway, thank you for saving us." Burton was quite startled. He thought to himself, "Oh Spider, it's the eldest lady. At this time Spider and the white wolf are going to war. Is it a coincidence or something?" Parva Rostilo propped himself up, grabbed Clara's leg and said, "We were ambushed by the enemy. The captain wants me to break through the siege and go out to tell the leader what's going on. I'm here, okay, but I still can't escape the pursuit of the two enemies." Parva Rostilo's eyes closed tightly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Even though I'm not willing, if it weren't for your help just now, I have absolutely no strength left to fight until the end. I can only remember what the captain said." Parva Rostilo repeated the words, "Let's pray for a miracle to come." Her lips moved, said, "Everything was arranged by that gentleman." Burton was quite shocked when he heard that word. He was startled and thought, "That's it. So it's like that. The current situation is intentionally pushed by a bookstore owner." Burton imagined that they were all chess pieces arranged by Lin Ji. He thought, "Now that I think back in this chess game, He already helped helping Ji Jixu escape from the White Wolf organization and giving her the power to once again unite the hunters. He also led me to escape the control of the Truth Society. And hinted that I have if I could receive help from Spider. I think it was a coincidence that I met a member of Spider who was being hunted by a White Wolf here. But on second thought, if I hadn't been tortured by the Truth Association for so long, I wouldn't have. Won't come here. Burton's eyes widened, and the opportunity for this whole thing came from the advice the bookstore owner gave me. In this situation, this is not a coincidence but is part of that great man's plan. Burton thought of Lin Ji's face in the dark. Burton thought, the bookstore owner did that to create an opportunity for this girl to owe me a favor, so that we can cooperate more smoothly in the future. It's really cool, a delicate and bold composition, seemingly random but consistent with each other. Each step is not idle because that man has a deep plan that makes people terrified. Burton was extremely scared. Before his thoughts, he thought, I believe that. If the bookstore owner appeared in front of me at this time, he would definitely tell me that. Burton imagined Lin Ji's lost lips revealing that the White Tooth said, Are you clear on what you should do, Burton Ackerman? Burton knelt on one knee next to the girl as if a beam of light shone. Burton said, I understand. Burton pulled out something from his inner pocket that said, Now is the time to settle. Need to play a corresponding role in this game. Injection containing pink liquid injected into the wing Parva Rostilo's hand. Parva Rostilo groaned, Ah. Parva Rostilo's eyes opened wide. Parva Rostilo looked at his whole body without any wound and said, My wound has healed. Not only that, even physical strength has also recovered. Burton stood up and said, It is an impure blood activator. An essential item for a hunter to survive. And can take effect so quickly. Shows that the quality of the impure blood in your body is very good. Burton pulled out a knife from behind his back and said, So. Since we are here to help, let's help you along. Burton smiled and said, Don't worry, little spider. Burton stood up straight, holding his sword and said, White Wolf. Those beasts don't have a chance to hurt you again, leaving behind so many prey. It's not the hunter's style. Come back and say hello to Miss G for me. Parva Rostilo happily smiled and said, What you said is the truth. Before Parva Rostilo could finish speaking, a loud scream said, Is that enough? You scum. Countless injections fell to the ground. Parva Rostilo's eyes widened. It turned out that Barbar was taking countless syringes injected into his body. He injected the medicine and said, Do you think this boss will sit here and listen to you talk nonsense? A waste that can only rely on stimulants to continue its declining life. After all, it's just that you can't control the force of blood. Barbar's hands were full of black hair. He said, For a genius like me. Barbar was no longer human. He was directly transformed into a humanoid wolf. He said, Directly using impure blood to increase strength is the fastest way. Barbar's wolf mouth spoke. He said, Restrict chemical medicine as much as possible, lose as little sanity as possible, while maximizing the power and regeneration of impure blood. Black Wolf Barbar raised his stick and shouted loudly, This is the most perfect use of impure blood. It is something that only I, a genius, can do. Are you ready for true horror? These scum. Parva Rostilo saw this and quickly shouted, Not good. Is he there to take the opportunity to strengthen himself? That senior. He is very strong. You must be careful, Burton said, without fear. He said, Oh, well said. In reality this is exactly the same as wild dogs. You're already dead and you still won't admit defeat. Burton was so provocative that Parva Rostilo stood next to him with wide eyes. Burton said, Strong means strong in that aspect. In terms of strength, it is not equal to a fully rational, thinking animal. His thinking isn't as good as a normal person's. Isn't that also stupid in that aspect? Burton covered his mouth and smiled, glanced at Parva Rostilo and said, This dares to call himself a genius. It's scaring me to death. Parva Rostilo was scared and said, Why did you provoke him? Barbar turned into a black wolf and growled, looked at Burton and said, You have underestimated me. Burton scratched his head and said, No need. Why do I look down on you? To put it bluntly, if you weren't lazy right now, I wouldn't even look at you. Burton glanced at Barbar. It's worth it. It's a shame you're still trying your best to keep your sanity. Obviously you won't be able to use it forever. Barbar rushed up and shouted, So brave. Barbar hit his staff towards Burton. He shouted, It's not enough. There's no escape. Those who despise me will go to their deaths. The trick that the Black Wolf using, that is Hell Express stab. Burton was startled because the staff was right in front of him. He said, so fast. Burton's eyes opened wide and shouted, I'm dead. I can't avoid it in time. The shadows of the two people fell. The Black Wolf's staff stabbed straight into Burton's stomach. Burton screamed loudly, ah! The Black Wolf growled loudly. The captain and Parva Rostilo were both bewildered, covering her face. Clara sat up next to her and said, Barbar, you even used this trick. It seems like he really made you angry. Why do you have to do that, right? Clara sneered, this move is powerful in that it will cause the person hit by the move. All internal organs will be broken. Parva Rostilo covered his mouth, tears forming at the corner of his eyes. Clara's voice echoed, said otherwise. Even a hunter with excellent recovery ability will die, only to see the Black Wolf's staff stab hard into Burton's stomach. But at this moment, one of Burton's arms reached up to grab it. That staff. The Black Wolf was startled. What? Parva Rostilo and Clara both looked at Burton in bewilderment. Burton threw down the sword in his other hand. With his other hand he held tightly the staff in his stomach. He said, it was my negligence. This time I will catch you. This is a good move. If it wasn't me here but someone else, I would have died a long time ago. It can only be said that you have the talent to kill. But it hasn't been trained much yet. Burton thought he was going to die. But now he stroked his hair, pointed his finger at the Black Wolf and said, if you really kill me, you should aim for my head. Do you understand, little guy? The Black Wolf couldn't believe it. He shouted loudly, no way, why are you still alive? This boss has clearly penetrated straight into your heart. At this moment, the Black Wolf's eyes widened. He was startled and thought, wait. This feeling. He looked towards Burton's chest as if there was a black hole sucking his staff. He was startled and thought, my spear didn't hit. It just disappeared. How did that hole come about, again? At this moment he wanted to pull his spear back but couldn't pull it out. He shouted, what the hell? Wait, why can't I move? Barbar tried to pull out his spear out but couldn't. Clara on the other side also had a problem. There were tentacles wrapping around her. She shouted, hey wait. When did this thing appear? Barbar help me. Quote. At this moment, Burton smiled and said, no one can save you. How happy, aren't you, you beasts? Parva Rostilo was supporting the captain on the other side and turned to look at Burton. I just heard Burton say, you're about to become the first tribute that I sacrifice for them. Do you feel extremely honored for this? I only saw a giant monster appear behind Burton, which he was using to shovel, tightly tying the two Barbar and Clara. Burton said, your life, your strength, your future talents and all that makes up your existence will all become the most suitable nutrients to please them. The giant monster tied Barbar tightly. He shouted, wait, what are you talking about? Let go. Right in front of the Black Wolf Barbar is a hole as black as the universe, which can swallow him. Burton's voice echoed, see that void? Dive into it. This is the eternal result for the rest of my life. Barbar stood in a quiet black space, without a sound. Now he had turned back into a human. He shouted, why can't you see anything? Where is this? Let me out. In here there are some echoes of little sheeps bleating. Barbar walked quickly on the black road. Barbar shouted, disgusting. What are you nagging? What do you think you can do to me? Barbar raised his hand and gritted his teeth and said, my lord's bones are gone. The urgent thing is to quickly run away. That bleating sound was still echoing. At this moment Barbar was startled. Suddenly, he looked at his hand covered in slime and said, what is this? It's disgusting. Barbar clenched his fist, clenched his teeth, and shouted in annoyance, really, from the beginning until now. It's been screaming and making noise to the point of death. Where did that sheep come from to this bloody place? Quote. When he was startled, in front of him there was a monster's mouth open wide with saliva flowing. Barbar saw the panic. He screamed loudly. His eyes widened, rolled up like it was about to crack. He shouted. The lighter in his hand fell to the ground. Barbar was tied tightly to his body by that monster, preparing to put it into his mouth with a voice that echoed, yesterday's ugly birds was still there. Outside at this time, Barbar's staff fell right where Clara was tied up. She was scared, looking at the monster's mouth filled with blood showing that it had digested Barbar. Parva Rostilo was to stop his startled captain. The captain said, this Parva Rostilo continued. What is it? I only saw that giant monster like a giant human skeleton. In the middle of its chest was a black hole. Its face was as scary as a clown. Its whole body was as big as a giant tree. Burton was quite pleased and said, this is the first time I can become a celestial beast. Reaching this level without affecting my sanity. This is truly a great gift. It seems like they gave up. I put a lot of effort into this tribute. Are the compliments I received from them enough for you? I mean, in the future, I just need to hunt well. Clara was afraid. Tears forming in her eyes, you trembled and said, no. No way. Is that the Pale Watchman? Clara looked at the giant monster before her eyes and said, no way. It's a dream monster known for its violence and uncontrollability. Hunters injected with this blood often explode to death right after becoming a beast. Because he couldn't stand this ferocious blood, how could a hunter control this monster in a conscious state? A monster's antennae slowly crawled towards Clara. Burton said generously, sigh. It's also a good thing to be able to increase your understanding before you die. Your partner just, let's enjoy the melody of real fear. Right, very good. I can make you as scared as you wish. The monster's eyes flashed red. His voice still ringing. Hey little spiders, now go find your leader. It's inconvenient for you guys to keep standing next to me like this. This voice was talking to the two Parva Rostilo. Burton also said, go inform your companions and speak. What he said is unclear. Monster Burton opened his mouth, stuck out his tongue then under Clara's frightened eyes. It swallowed her into its stomach. The scene before their eyes made the captain and Parva Rostilo immediately understand. At this moment there was only one thing they could do. That was to run, standing in front of the giant monster. Parva Rostilo quickly pulled his captain and ran as fast as he could. And thunder crashed down from the sky. Lin Ji stood in her bookstore watching the rain outside the window and said, the weather in Nuojin is really weird. It's getting worse and worse. Lin Ji touched the sword on the table and said, the rain is about to stop, okay? He sighed, sigh. I really don't feel secure with such a precious item. It's better to definitely put it in the bedroom. Later buy a stand and ban it from leaving there. Lin Ji put the sword on the table then lay down on the bed and said, see it as an evil repellent. Lin Ji closed her eyes. The dream bell hanging on the wall emitted blue light. Lin Ji said, now let's go to sleep. Lin Ji lay on the pillow and said, hope to have a nice dream tonight. The leaf outside had a little drop of water. The sword was on the table empty moving. With Lin Ji sleeping, the scene was very peaceful in contrast to the situation outside. That drop of water fell onto the quiet lake surface. Thunder and lightning thundered down. Lin Ji slowly opened her eyes, so this time he wasn't standing on the beautiful iris field anymore but his feet were walking on dry ground. Lin Ji opened his eyes. His eyes were bewildered when he saw the scene before him. I only saw that this place seemed to be a cliff surrounded by fog and there was only darkness. Darkness covered with dense fog. Lin Ji stood still and did not move. He also did not speak. What? Lin Ji asked herself, is it a waking dream again? But Lin Ji thought of the white-haired beauty with big breasts. Silver, standing in the beautiful iris field. He bewilderedly asked himself in his heart, where is my little sister? The big little sister in my heart, where has my dream gone? It's been a long time since I last had a peaceful dream. I'm looking forward to it. Lin Ji exhaled and said, there's no way to dream. After all, it's not subject to subjective control. Right? Then Lin Ji looked around again to check, what is this again? The boss fight scene. Lin Ji looked down, this seems to be an abandoned city. Lin Ji thought to herself, according to Freud's dream interpretation book that I read before. Dreams are manifestations of desires subconsciously. Then I can understand that it's been so long since I time traveled that I haven't played games. So much so that even my dreams are starting to express this desire. Lin Ji closed her eyes. He placed his hand on his mouth and coughed lightly. It doesn't seem too different. That's it. Lin Ji's eyes opened slightly and then said, if that's true. Lin Ji thought about the pile of toys, then there is no other way. Now the problem is not whether we want it or not, but because the hardware conditions absolutely do not allow it. Nuojin is a backward game industry. Can play GBA, it's already a blessing. Lin Ji was extremely sad. A drop of sweat fell on her face. Thinking about it, now that I think about it, I have a feeling dramatic background music is about to start and a powerful badass looking boss will show up. There will be a big boss with a cool style coming on stage. Lin Ji imagined a giant monster like Duoging and a knight holding a sword to fight. Out of her thoughts, Lin Ji walked away. Walking along the way, he gently squatted down to pick up a piece of something. Lin Ji looked at the yellow piece and speculated. Well, from my professional point of view, this decoration is wonderful and there's nothing to criticize. Damn, just from these fragments and those giant ruins that are still magnificent even when they collapse. One can imagine what a magnificent scene this place once was. Eyes Lin Ji stared at the item he had just picked up and it had very detailed carvings. Lin Ji said, but the style and decoration are a bit familiar. At this moment Lin Ji suddenly realized something. He thinking of Joseph's face. Lin Ji was startled and thought, that's right. That's Joseph's long sword. Normal people may not notice, but Master Lin is a professional in identifying folk art, and architecture is an important and inseparable part of folk culture. It can be said that it is the main job of the master. Lin Ji put the item he just picked up on the ground. He said, from this point of view it is really as a subconscious worship. Putting everything I've been through recently into a dream. Lin Ji stood up and smiled as if she had guessed everything and said, it is indeed my dream. This imagination is so rich. Lin Ji looked around at this dark ruined place and said, everything here just needs to be exploited a little. Let's see what surprise my consciousness will bring me this time. Lin Ji walked slowly into this ruined city and said as he walked, this dream a few times ago was actually two extremes. The map is also larger but still very interesting and feels surprisingly realistic. Quote, Lin Ji raised her hand to touch a ruin and said, the level of destruction in this ruin is beyond my imagination. Almost no one is allowed in. While Lin Ji was touching it, suddenly the ground fell. The shaking made Lin Ji's eyes widen like a carp's eyes. Lin Ji's hand holding the item also trembled. Very quickly everything in front of Lin Ji was ruined. Dirt and rocks were scattered everywhere. Lin Ji stood there looking bewildered and confused. Thinking, this is too new. The feeling of destroying something is like the feeling of welcoming the new year. Lin Ji's eyes flashed in her heart thinking, this feeling of freshness, it's so different. It's like fighting over noodles in the supermarket. I even want to do it a few more times. Lin Ji walked past the ruins again. He closed his eyes and thought as he walked, sigh. I can only experience R-rated RPG scenes in my dreams. I'll have to enjoy it while I can. Lin Ji opened her eyes to look at the pile of rock that had just collapsed, however such exploration was not without results. I found a lot of corpses. Only saw in front of Lin Ji were countless corpses. Limbs and heads severed, and there were also bodies still intact. Lin Ji looked at the body of one person said, well, these bodies are relatively intact compared to that pile of crushed ruins, which is a bit stronger. Plus, if I'm not mistaken, Lin Ji was squatting down to check the body died. He said, a corpse's ears are longer than normal. Lin Ji reached out and turned the intact person over and saw that the other person had eyeballs sticking out. His ears were long. Death was extremely worthy. Scared, Lin Ji stared and said, huh. Looking from the front is even clearer. The ears of these corpses are longer than normal. Lin Ji picked up the bloody ear and said, cartilage, the soft middle is connected to the head of this thing, is not a decoration. In other words, such a physiological structure. Lin Ji remembered Doris again. He was startled. Goblin. Lin Ji smiled brightly, thinking in my heart, speaking of which, the beautiful little sister I entertained not long ago. I was really impressed with her elf cosplay. Lin Ji stood up again and said, now it can be confirmed that this dream is indeed a mystery of the subconscious. It seems like recent thoughts have disturbed my dream. Lin Ji raised her hand and began to analyze every detail in her heart. The extraordinary connection of these things together gives me a long-lost feeling when doing research in a small village. Remote and secluded. In Lin Ji's hand appeared a file with a pen. Lin Ji started taking notes and said, just write it down. Lin Ji wrote while walking and thought to herself, when I wake up I will draw it out. Maybe it can give me some inspiration in rebuilding the historical meaning of the Iris family crest. Lin Ji walked again in the middle of the ruins. He walked through the goal. Suddenly Lin Ji's eyes widened slightly when she saw something. Only saw in the distance on the stairs a light shining on a shadowy figure kneeling there. Lin Ji walked slowly up the stairs wondering herself. Is this the center of the ruins? Only saw where the light shined was a person with long blonde hair and two ears like an ogre's hands kneeling on the ground. The other person's body was wearing armor. The sword was piercing through the chest. The other person's eyes were dark. In the dark, Lin Ji stood still and looked without moving. After a while he walked slowly towards the other person. The person with blonde hair and eyes in the dark also remained silent. After a while the other opened his eyes. Green pupils stared at Lin Ji said, "My savior." The blonde one spoke, "Souls exiled here for millennia." Also Lin Ji on this side is still trying to climb over the piles of ruins to climb towards the blonde. Lin Ji is sitting still on a rock and the blonde is still having a sword pierced through his chest. The two of them looked at each other silently without saying anything. After a while Lin Ji didn't sit on the rock anymore, but he climbed down and punched a rock hard and it broke. Lin Ji stood in the middle and broke his face a little red. Coughed lightly and thought, "Crap. Looks like I've triggered a cutscene. Shall I roleplay?" Then, Lin Ji slightly pursed her lips and put her finger on her chin in thought, "But that's exactly what I was doing." Think, this doesn't seem as profound as the apocalypse and the final boss battle. Lin Ji looked at the blonde sitting over there thinking, but rather a cutscene of an important NPC giving out a mission to a new player. Savior, that sounds so old-fashioned. In traditional role-playing games, 11 out of 10 player characters are saviors. Lin Ji gave himself a like mark in his heart. He still placed his finger on his chin in thought, combined with the current scene. Combined with his appearance and dialogue, I can roughly grasp 7 or 8 parts of this plot. Lin Ji walked slowly. He had already analyzed the plot in his heart, some time ago. There was a disaster in this place where the spirit in front of him was either the culprit or was unable to turn the situation around, eventually leading to tragedy, and when he woke up he realized everyone was dead. He couldn't bear the self-blame and pain in his heart. So he chose to commit suicide or seal himself, and has been tormented all this time. Lin Ji walked again closer towards the blonde. The plot was still running loudly in his head, until someone who can save the world and fix his mistakes appears. It's basically like this. When Lin Ji got closer, he saw the sword in the blonde man's hand. He was startled and confused, thinking, isn't this the sword that Joseph sent? This confirms it. You dream about the things you think about during the day. Or is it because I studied that sword too much during the day? So now I even dream about it in my dreams. Lin Ji stood with her hands on her hips, scratching her chin with one hand, thinking, it's really like my subconscious is knowing how to work to be able to arrange every detail so perfectly. It seems like I've read too many books. At this moment the blonde spoke up, on behalf of the kingdom I have to thank you for making the holy sword shine again. Lin Ji glanced at the other person, then glanced to the other side. The blonde's voice was still saying, this is the third impossible sin, forgive what I have committed. Lin Ji pondered and thought to himself, the holy sword must be the one stuck on his body. And that is also the long sword that Joseph sent. No wonder I wondered if this sword was a bit dirty. Then I realized that the craftsmanship of this sword was very special. Like a penitent god. It seemed like in a dream it had become my credit. It was indeed a dream. My dream. It's really like gold on my face. Lin Ji gave himself a like sign and smiled and said, it's okay. That's what I should do. Lin Ji raised her hand silently in her heart. Think, in general, this type of bitterness and hatred is often relatively lonely. Lack of communication with others leads to a heavy psychological burden. The bright light still shines on the person kneeling on the ground while Lin Ji then leisurely sitting on the chair in front of the kneeling person. He thought to himself, coincidentally, there are no other guests nearby except Joseph. Giving this brother some advice is not a bad choice. Lin Ji raised her voice and said, if there is a third sin, do you have the right to share with me the sins you have committed? I really want to hear your story. Lin Ji touched her chin and smiled to herself. Leading him to speak up is not a way to add salt to the wound but a way to purify. Not to mention that he himself confessed his sins first. It can be seen that he also wanted to chat. The blue pupils of the blonde-haired man stared at Lin Ji. A drop of sweat fell down. The other man's hand still held the hilt of the sword tightly and he bowed his head and said, if you want to listen to a sinner's monologue, it would be my honor. Lin Ji heard that and put his hand on his chin, feeling a little relieved, thinking, just as I expected. This person really wanted to tell his pain. This is why evil people often want to confess strongly. They always raise their voices in front of others after their plans. The plan is almost successful. Next to Lin Ji, there seemed to be dark shadows smiling. He was still thinking, but it cannot be ruled out that some writers and screenwriters want to quickly expose the truth and let the audience know. The main character, time and space, to fight against the script. Lin Ji exclaimed in her heart. It's all a script. Lin Ji raised her voice and asked, so what does the sin in your mouth ultimately refer to? The blonde's ears moved slightly. Then the blonde slowly recounted, thousands of years ago in an age without light and fire. Because of pride I tried to kill the gods to expand the territory for my people. Blood flowed onto the shack. A giant eye with red irises was staring at the blonde. The blonde's voice was still telling, I finally have fallen into madness just by looking into the eyes of those gods. That is a crime of cowardice. At that moment the blonde man wearing a red robe held his sword against countless corpses. I am their king. But I massacred my own people right after going crazy. Destroying my origin with my own hands. This is treason. The Candela sword floated. I hold the sacred sword but it was stained with the blood of my own people. So I used it to seal my own dirty and twisted soul so that it would lose its light forever. Bringing the last sacred symbol of the kingdom to life. Dust. That is the crime of stupidity. At that moment the blonde man without hesitation stabbed the sword through his chest. I have brought the kingdom to a peak and also destroyed it completely. For the next 10,000 years. The crown became my chains. The blonde placed his hand on his chest and said, people call me an exile. Candela. Lin Ji after listening story he thought to himself, if that's true. Then it's roughly the same as I guess this spirit's current condition is probably similar to the real sword spirit. It's really pathetic enough. Lin Ji stood up and looked the kneeling blonde asked, you call me savior? Lin Ji said, but I didn't save you. And your kingdom fell. Lin Ji's finger pointed at the other person's face said, look at what you've done. Do you still want to ask me to do something? Candela's whole body trembled and asked in bewilderment, your kindness makes me gradually become ashamed. Candela's whole body trembled non-stop, but please calm down. I never thought that. I am redeemed for this mistake. You have helped me a lot but my kingdom has soon turned into the dust of history. Candela bowed his head, his eyes sinking into the darkness and said, I am no longer qualified. What else can I do for this land? No matter what, I have no way to make up for my sins. Lin Ji heard that and stared at Candela in bewilderment, making Candela tremble even more. Lin Ji thought, how can he look like a child who was scolded by his parents for being so demanding? This guy is probably just blaming himself endlessly for being sealed for 10,000 years. That makes me I fall into a psychological block that leads me to fall into a state where I hear everything as if I'm scolding myself. Lin Ji's eyes were filled with thoughts. He thought to himself, the calm surface besides being defeated by someone else's idle question. I have to enlighten him. Lin Ji raised her voice and said, no need for more words. You're just abandoning yourself. That's because you said you were guilty but now you say you don't want to atone for your mistakes. That's shirk your own responsibility. Lin Ji's face sank slightly. His eyes filled with seriousness. He said, in reality, your behavior doesn't mean anything. It's just your own cowardice. You used to care about it. What will my kingdom be like in the future? Lin Ji stared at Candela who was kneeling on the ground in front and said, how are my remaining citizens now? Where are they wandering and building their homes? Hearing that sentence Candela raised her eyes to look at Lin Ji. Lin Ji was still saying, you clearly have great strength but you're blaming yourself here. You're just playing with yourself. Give me an excuse not to take responsibility. Candela clearly saw her own image reflected in Lin Ji's eyes. Lin Ji said, becoming a torment in everyone's eyes, this is a crime, you should bear it. Not shrink back like you are now. Candela's hand holding the sword trembled even more. Lin Ji was still talking non-stop, no qualifications, right? Where are you talking about qualifications here? This is the price to pay for what you caused it. Blood dripped onto the ground. Lin Ji said, in these tens of thousands of years, you haven't grown up at all. You've just kept moving back, and back again, waiting for someone else to forgive you. Lin Ji said very eloquently. Have you ever put your hands on your forehead and think, when you sit here and do nothing, the pain that people feel is painful, your suffering is much greater than yours. Lin Ji walked over and patted Candela's shoulder and said, think about it. You will know exactly what you do. No one is your savior. Only you can save yourself. Candela was startled when she heard what Lin Ji said. Sweat flowed down Candela. Candela trembled and said, you're right. But my stupidity is deeply rooted. Candela's tears flowed. Full face said, without your guidance, I really don't know what I should do anymore. I'm afraid of making the same mistake. Lin Ji heard that and thought to herself, what does he mean? I let myself give him instructions when he made a decision. That action was indeed a wise decision. Candela lowered his eyes and bowed his head and said, please be merciful and forgive me for my last sin. Finally, this sinner has gone beyond the limit. Candela's hair falls to the ground. Candela puts her hands on the ground, bows her head in front of Lin Ji and says, I want to be your sword. Candela kneels down. The sword is still pinned on his chest. Please be merciful and forgive this sinner's last sin. Because he has gone beyond the limit. I want to become your sword. Lin Ji heard that, slightly startled. He thought to himself, what does it mean to become my sword? This is also very difficult. Judging from his attitude, it seems like he is a loyal and tame person. Is this the plot where the new soldier gives the sword to a new partner initially? ? Let's imagine. Player Lin Ji received the Spirit King village sword that became his partner. Lin Ji thought, a bit confused, otherwise he wouldn't have given the village hotel sword to me. Lin Ji clenched his fist and put it on his mouth and coughed. Then he raised his voice and asked, have you thought about it carefully? This is your decision? Lin Ji thought to himself. Anyway, I don't know how long this dream can last. Providing psychological counseling to a tragic character for him, with wish to help him regain hope for a fulfilling life. It doesn't sound bad. Doing a good deed like this is actually a beautiful thing. Lin Ji said to Candela, what you really want to do, it's not like I can solve it with just 1 or 2 sentences. This requires you to do it yourself because of the sins you have committed. And because of the past that you have wasted all this time. Lin Ji's eyes narrowed as he stared at Candela, thinking, these words did not hurt his confidence, but rather used magic to provoke him. As expected, my whole body is full of positive energy. That is light, light of justice. Lin Ji's face was solemn. Face the subjects you have forgotten. No one will forgive you. If you still keep that cowardly mentality, then continue to hide here. Go. Candela heard that. His eyes were in the dark and silent for a while, then said, I understand. Then Candela raised his head. Still holding the sword, golden light shone on him. Candela spoke. My soul has been consumed over the centuries. As punishment for my crimes. That abyss ugly resentment turned into a mad curse that engulfed me. And even become me. Candela held out one of her hands. Opened her hand as if to catch the light, saying, when that curse dissipates, what's left here? Then Candela's hand clenched tightly. It's just the soul's last attachment. Candela smiled. You're right. I just want to take advantage of others' forgiveness to give myself an excuse to escape. Candela raised her head to look at Lin Ji's face standing in front of her. I'm truly unqualified. But it's not that I'm unqualified to do anything for my kingdom and people. It's that I am not qualified to continue being a coward. Candela looked at Lin Ji and said each word, this time. There is no more glory. No more Spirit King Candela. I am just an exile returning to my hometown. Candela's eyes were full of seriousness and said, before I disappear completely, I think I should really do something instead of begging others to give me alms. Amidst the piles of rubble, ruined ruins where light could hardly penetrate, Candela knelt on the ground while Lin Ji was standing. Candela said, even though my kingdom no longer exists on this land after tens of thousands of years, my people still live here. Candela's eyes stared somewhere. Over the past 10,000 years, the giants and spirits of the past have become part of the historical stage. Countless shadows appeared looming behind Candela. The curse of the magic sword has killed countless people. Their mad resentment and memories always linger in my soul. Candela remembers the abandoned city ruined. My soul has witnessed the history of Azir. I have also witnessed 2 once glorious countries, in the end becoming a nihilistic legend. Candela seemed to fall to the bottom of the abyss. Humanity on the ruins, this once burned ruin. Candela still kneels on the war-filled ruins. Built a giant city called Nujin, and then Candela seems to be kneeling in the center of the city. Nuo Jin is vast and full of growth. It grows as strong as my kingdom once did. The wheels of history will not wait. The spirit kingdom will not be able to reappear again. Everything at once, it was like breaking into pieces of glass in Candela's eyes. So let's do something more realistic. This time I can use the last bit of strength I have left to protect my people and my kingdom once again. Candela's eyes closed. Instead of dying in the darkness, Candela's eyes opened. Better than burning all that's left of you. Candela placed a hand on her chest where the sword was pinned, came in and said, I think the only thing I can do now is just one thing. Lin Ji crossed her arms and stared at Candela. Wait. Candela moved his lips and tilted his head to look at Lin Ji. Please use this sword as a weapon to kill the gods from the dream. After Lin Ji finished listening, he put his hand on his chin, thinking, this is mission statement. But it doesn't seem to cause any difficulty for new players. Lin Ji was extremely confused because he was only level 5. But level 99 was right in front of his eyes. Thinking, this dream comes indiscriminately. Is that so? Just go straight to killing gods, or is it a guide for beginners? Lin Ji felt like she was struck by lightning in her head because of her chaotic thoughts. Candela looked at Lin Ji again with eyes filled with sadness and said, thousands of years ago, I held a grudge and wanted to kill God. Sorry, the final drama leads to the downfall of the kingdom. The light shone down on Candela's body, revealing a cool sadness. Candela spoke up. 10,000 years later on the same land. Do I want to fulfill this wish? Not for ourselves, but only for our people who still live on this land. Candela's eyes closed as if praying and said, I offer you my absolute loyalty and most precious tribute. I hope you will forgive this request that goes beyond this last limit. Before I disappear, quote. Lin Ji covered his eyes and raised a hand to stop Candela from continuing. Wait, to be honest, Lin Ji had a bit of a headache because of Candela's words. He slightly twisted his mouth and said, this kind of fighting thing, hey. I'm really not very knowledgeable. Lin Ji fell into a whirlwind of thoughts again. In theory, I'm just an ordinary bookstore owner and I don't have such powerful powers. That kind of thing. I've never done this even in reality, let alone in my dreams. This is too much. Isn't this okay to wake up from a dream? Quote. Lin Ji had a headache thinking. When you realize you're in a dream, you won't feel comfortable doing things that you've never done in reality. And not being good at it is one thing. Playing badly is another. Even in my dreams I still enlighten the person in front of me and say many noble words. Lin Ji imagined herself holding a sword to fight a beast. Lin Ji covered her face and thought. In the end, he held the sword and slashed several times. Even if he won, it would be embarrassing. He ruined his image as a bright teacher. Lin Ji didn't cover his face anymore. He pursed his lips and stared at Candela, thinking, as a professional guru, your image cannot be lost. If you lose your confidence, how can you confess in the future? Breakfast for guests. At this time Candela smiled again and said, you don't need to worry too much. Candela put both hands down to take the crown from her head. Candela looked at Lin Ji affectionately, I will is your strength. Even making a buffalo and a horse for you. Candela offered her crown in front of Lin Ji. I told you. I will become your sword. Under the bright light, Candela knelt on the ground, holding up the crown with both hands, although I am no longer the king. When I die the crown is still on me. After that the kingdom is destroyed and no one can inherit the kingdom. Crown. Candela smiled at Lin Ji. This is my most precious treasure. But perhaps to others it is worthless. I give it to you. Laying down all my glory, let's go down. Lin Ji also raised both hands to receive the crown. He held the crown in his hand and thought a little bewildered. The decoration seems complicated but the weight is very light. The material is probably laurel branch. When Lin Ji was staring at that crown, the other crown emitted white-yellow light, then it entered Lin Ji's body. Lin Ji was bewildered and thought to herself, disappear. No. Lin Ji looked at her arm. It turned out that there was a shape printed on Lin Ji's arm. Candela explained, the crown is already a part of my soul. This is the seal of the Star Spirit King and it is the only item I can use to thank him. Lin Ji looked at the new tattoo on his arm and said, is that so? He thought to himself, the feeling. There is no, it doesn't feel like anything. It's like drawing a bracelet on the wrist. Candela stepped on one foot to the ground and said, now. The golden light on Candela's body shone brightly like the noon sun. Candela held the hilt of the sword in one hand and knelt on the ground, bowing to Lin Ji like a soldier kneeling before the king. Candela held the hilt of the sword tightly in his chest. The sword emitted yellow light. Candela slowly stood up, woke up. The bright yellow light startled Lin Ji. Candela stood up straight. Candela's figure was extremely tall. Lin Ji thought in bewilderment, When I knelt I didn't notice he was much taller than I thought. Lin Ji is now just standing at Candela's chest. Lin Ji thinks, must be 2 meters 5. Candela held the sword and pointed it towards Lin Ji. Please pull it out. Then I will fight for you. Lin Ji reached out to hold the sword. He pulled the sword out Candela's body. He was a bit bewildered. Blood flowed out onto the sword held in Lin Ji's hand. The golden light surrounding Candela gradually broke. Lin Ji reached out to touch it. Countless blurry scenes virtual image appeared. The image of a newborn baby crying in a diaper. A toddler holding a sword practicing. A child pure eagle. A child receiving a rose from his lover and finally a child kneeling on the ground next to him. Was an eagle, in front of whom the crown was given under the blessing of all the people. And when the time came for that child to become a king to rule the country and make it prosperous, that child was raising the sword high. Golden light enveloped Candela's fragmented memories appearing in front of Lin Ji. Lin Ji reached out to touch a fragment. Lin Ji's face reflected on that fragment. And then Lin Ji saw with her own eyes that the king who loved his country and his people turned crazy. His whole body was covered in blood and his eyes were no longer calm. The darkness gradually covered. Lin Ji saw Candela is holding a sword. Her red cape is fluttering. Standing behind the building. The sword is raised and slashes. Blood flows down. Has changed. Candela's hair fluttered. What's wrong with the voice? Lin Ji saw Candela holding a sword with the power to kill gods. This is Candela's life, although after that was occasionally mixed with some strange scenes. But it was impossible to know what happened after he went crazy. But in the era without light or fire that he mentioned, there was only him, who holds the light and fire. Like sending the sun against the flow of its orbit and throwing it towards the gods. There is no doubt that he is the bravest. Of the pair someone's eyes were slowly opening wide. In those eyes was red. Thunder and lightning thundered down. Candela's face was in darkness. Candela's voice said, "This place no longer seems to be on the roof. In the middle of the ruins. My sight." Candela reached out to grab her own hair. Candela's eyes were no longer blue pupils, but a pair of black pupils. Candela was startled. This is. Obviously, however, now it is no longer Candela but Lin Ji in Candela's form. Candela's figure is actually Lin Ji in Candela's body holding the sword in his hand, bewildered. Lin Ji in Candela's body silently thought, I see. It seems I passed through those memories to Candela's memories. And then became him. Is this considered another dream within another dream? The mark on Lin Ji's hand glowed. Lin Ji's whole body had yellow lightning. A big claw appeared with falling feathers. A huge beast appeared on his head. Lin Ji. It was the eagle in Candela's memory. Lin Ji looked at the eagle and thought, this dream is reasonable and kind. In other words, the situation now is like this. The eyes of Lin Ji brightly looked at the eagle. He raised his hand, looked at his strange hands and thought, this elemental king has power but is afraid of me. So he asked me to guide him in using it. Use this sword to kill another god that has just appeared. So now I become the reason and guide that Candela needs. Lin Ji very happily stroked the head of the giant eagle. The eagle's head was stroked very happily. It even hummed the song. The thought in Lin Ji's mind ran wild, simply to directly take over. Or in other words, control his soul. It is probably equivalent to with eating a fruit of the illusory beast type Candela. Lin Ji hugged the eagle very satisfied, not caring about the Candela sword lying on the ground. Lin Ji thought, by the way, this eagle's feathers, it's so nice to touch. I can rub it all year round. I'm considering whether to get a cat in the store right away. At this time, Lin Ji held the sword again. He looked at the purple lightning in the sky and thought to himself. Even so, let's do official things first. Candela said before that he wanted to protect your people. Is this a battlefield or a dungeon? Lin Ji touched the sword in her hand and smiled, thinking, the current atmosphere is like following the rhythm of the big boss. I'm so excited to fight the big boss with this big boss item. Lin Ji called out, Candela. The sword made a sound and replied, yes. Lin Ji thought like that, you are here right? Guy, you have become a soul in own sword. Lin Ji's eyes flashed. He held the sword behind his back was the giant eagle. Lin Ji said, the gods you speak of. Looked at the black sky with purple lightning bolts. Lin Ji asked, are you there? Something gradually appeared in the black sky. A large arm holding an axe emitting a dim purple light gradually revealed. Outside, the rain was pouring down wetly on the roof. The white wolves House was covered in blood. Panting heavily, the white wolf just now had killed countless other human-turned beasts. The white wolf's eyes flashed thinking, damn, these guys are so crazy. I'm still not strong enough. Wolf White defensively looked at the grey marshal opposite him who was flashing red eyes. The white wolf thought, they seem like they don't want to live. They don't have a goal in their eyes. They only unconsciously kill people and then die. These people are no longer humans but dream beasts. The white wolf's eyes flashed red, then swung its claws to attack the grey wolf. The grey wolf on the other side dodged. It was not defeated, but it seemed even crazier than the wolf. The grey wolf smiled. The white wolf was now floating and standing above a bloody pit. The white wolf saw the grey wolf smile and gritted his teeth. Thinking, I have a bad feeling. The white wolf rushed back. Far away, the grey wolf thought, during the battle just now, Helix didn't seem to leave this deep hole, and intentionally or unintentionally pushed all the bodies of those dead hunters into the hole. Such behavior it's so unusual. The white wolf's eyes flashed something is wrong. He did it on purpose. They deliberately guarded here to make me think this was a destroyed hatchery. Quote, the white wolf stood on a rock looking at Helix, who had transformed back into human form. The white wolf thought to himself, but in reality it's not like that. Helix smiled and spoke like a devil, the sacrifice has been, that's enough. The white wolf and Helix stood apart in a red hole. That red light slowly flowed. It spread. Then that red light gradually engulfed the corpses. The white wolf with a sweaty head glanced at it and understood the problem, so that's it. No wonder they don't care about their own casualties at all. Because all Helix needs is a corpse. It's gone. The corpses lying on the ground were gradually absorbed by the red gas. The red gas absorbed enough sacrifices to form a giant formation with countless skulls. Round balls pinned by the arrows emitted red light. Then it emitted a beam of light that dazzled people's eyes. A bright yellow-red formation on the ground flashed red lightning. The white wolf kept trembling and the white wolf screamed loudly when he saw the scene before him. A pair of red eyes flashed countless purple lightning bolts that struck down there. A huge monster with tentacles like White the giant octopus appeared. The other guy held a yellow axe and his body was extremely large. When the monster appeared, purple lightning also struck. Helix spread his arms and shouted loudly, God! Ah, the great rain god! Helix's eyes widened with blood. I finally did it. Helix looked at the giant monster above and said, hey stupid people, let's celebrate. He's born. In the sky, rain fell heavily, thunder and lightning roared. The monster had two wings flying on its back. It raised its axe high, accompanied by loud explosions of thunder and lightning. The monster stared at the white wolf from above, powerfully, causing the white wolf to falter. The white wolf trembled his whole body thinking, this kind of pressure. The white wolf slightly raised his eyes to look at the giant monster. No doubt it is at the god level. The distance is great, too. Around the white werewolf as if there were tentacles sticking in. The white wolf trembled and thought, if he doesn't have an iron will to keep himself awake. The trembling and fear from instinct can cause I went crazy right on the spot. The white wolf stood still and trembled without moving, while Helix stood in the pool of blood with his mouth reading some kind of unknown spell and other characters that made the listener unable to understand anything. Helix stood like a madman in a pool of blood, sticking out his tongue and licking, saying, so great. Helix smiled loudly. Now his whole body began to mutate. His face gradually turned into a devil with his tongue sticking out. In his mouth there were countless tentacles crawling out, and other eyes then grew all over his body. He raised his arms. Blood flowed out all over his body. The monster called God did not hold back and killed Helix, who tried to use the power to summon the god. The white wolf stood in the rain, looked up and said, so tragic. Is that the end of the former white wolf leader Helix? In the eyes of the white wolf reflected the image of Helix. His blood was flowing all over his body. Until he died, Helix could not escape the damage. Inexplicable to the egg of the enchanted mirror. He killed all the Drac wizards in the Scarlet Cult. Helix's legs standing in the blood pool gradually melted, secretly slaughtering hundreds of thousands of civilians. Helix fell into the blood pool and his whole body was submerged in the blood pool. Sacrificed the white wolves that he had worked hard managing for decades. The huge silhouette of the monster called God obscured the silhouette of Helix under the pool of blood. Finally the god from afar that he always thought were summoned and appeared before his eyes. He couldn't even look at him once. The white wolf standing in the rain couldn't help but feel sad for Helix's situation. The white wolf thought to himself, I can't do anything anymore. The best choice right now. The white wolf turned around and left quickly. The white wolf thought, it's an escape. The white wolf ran in the opposite direction of the monster while thinking, I can fight with all my strength at the level of destruction. Destroy. But there is not much chance of winning. But this is a divine level, so let's leave the mystery and the truth association to solve it. That huge monster looked at Nuojin City from above. It spread out its two wings. And on this side, Burton stood on the shoulders of the monster he created. Burton exclaimed, so exaggerated. Burton commented, those crazy people actually summoned gods from dreams. Burton's eyes slightly closed, thinking, this is not something regular magic mirror eggs can do. In a certain sense, the egg of the magic mirror is actually a kind of parasitic monster in its embryonic stage. It has the power to seduce people and can make the person who touches it develop greed and monopolization. The longer it is touched, the more severe the level becomes. After absorbing enough nutrients, it will become an egg incubated by dream creatures. If conditions are right, dream creatures can become reality through it. Burton raised his head to look at the monster in the distance, thinking, in other words, the magic mirror's egg is actually a portal through which someone can continue to live again. Burton's face was extremely serious and he said, perhaps all the supernatural people of Nuojin have sensed it by now. Because this place is no longer reality. Burton looked. That light gradually spread to half of the sky. Nuojin said, the dream gap opened. The boundary between dreams and reality began to blur. The giant monster stepped forward in the sky. The blood pool. He opened his big mouth and screamed. He raised his axe high, bringing with it thunder and lightning thundering down. Burton jumped up and down. Oh my God. If I've started to expand the scope, I can't just stay here stupidly. If those old knights and scholars don't hurry up and do something, something big will happen. Burton was stupid enough to stay and die. He smiled and said, even though it has nothing to do with me, it's time for you petty Ackerman to retreat. The loudspeaker continuously broadcasts important news. Attention all forces of the Truth Society. And right now, at the office of the Supreme Conference of the Truth Association, Andrew is sitting in the middle listening to his subordinates announce, number A3. Licensing documents. Level 4 Armory has been approved. Voting for approval. Passed. Number A3 proposed to begin launch. Ether Star Destruction Fortress. Request to be approved. Andrew sat silently listening to countless announcements ring out, and then it was approved. His hands clenched. Someone said, all parts please return to your positions. The Ether Star Destruction Fortress is ready. The sound of rapid footsteps echoed under the rain. There was a shout of, announce everyone in position. The Truth Society will launch the Star Destruction Fortress for the first attack. Groups 1 to 4 are responsible for handling the dreams. Beasts fleeing the dream world. A giant armored man with yellow hair shouted, Group 5 and Group 6 prepare for the second attack according to the established plan. And all the remaining members cooperate to support the Star Destruction Fortress. Let's all act urgently. The blonde man blind in one eye shouted sternly, if I see any of you trying to slack off, I'll send you to dig for potatoes with that old fart Joseph. The lost man one eye is Gresham Winston, captain of Tower of Secret Rights' combat squad, a member of the Radiant Knights. The rain is pattering. A figure is sitting behind the wall and holding his head. Morrison Gregg is scared and doesn't dare moving. Countless voices echoed, what's going on? Where did that terrible monster come from? Sir Joseph, what should we do? Greg was in tears and looked up to see someone calling, Greg. Greg looked over and asked, what are you doing there? Are you injured somewhere? Greg looked at the person who had just arrived and shouted, Senior Brother Claude. Only to see that Claude was no longer sealed in his thick glasses but was wearing a combat uniform. With a cape over his shoulders. Just like a warrior, the knight. Claude's face was now extremely sharp and handsome with grey pupils. Claude said, on occasions like this you should call me Vice Captain. Even if now you just as an intern. You must also be aware that you are one of the teacher's disciples. Greg said, a little scared, Master. Captain, what exactly is that monster? Haven't the White Wolf and the Scarlet Cult been destroyed by the Secret Tower and the Truth Society? Claude said, yes. The Secret Tower of the Truth Association acts very quickly. Under normal circumstances such a short time is absolutely not enough for the egg in the magic mirror to hatch. I thought this would calm down like this. Claude gritted his teeth and said. But unexpectedly, the white wolves are much crazier than we imagined. Claude thought of the countless bodies that had bled to death and said. They are slaughtered a lot of people. But still not big enough to open the dream rift. Not even the bodies of his own kind were spared. Claude said with a dark face. So no one thought of it. It came suddenly like this. Without any warning, the dreamland gap suddenly opened like this. Greg put his hand against the wall and held his chest tremblingly. What should we do now? Now, Master Joseph is not here. How can we defeat that monster? This continues. I don't know if we can protect anything. Tears flowed from his eyes and said, people like me really can't do anything. When he was collapsing, Claude called, raise your head for me. When Greg raised his head he took a hit. Claude's slap was like a thunderstorm. Greg's face was slapped so hard that he fell to the ground. Greg hugged his face and looked at Claude's back reflection. He trembled and called out, Deputy. Vice President. Claude stood up, serious strength, clenched fists. Stern face, and angrily said to Greg, what is that expression of yours? What does that look in your eyes mean? What are your 2 tears? Claude's eyes were very serious as he said, before, when the teacher was training, I said this. Claude recounted his training process. At that time Claude stood in the waterfall for a long time. Suffering from the coldness of the waterfall. Claude continuously shouted, ah. Claude quickly poked his head out of the waterfall. Claws trembled as he stood under the waterfall and said to Joseph, who was standing on the shore. No, teacher, this is already my limit. There is no way for a weak person like me to be as strong as him. Quote, at that time, Claude was just like Greg now, immediately receiving a heavy slap from Joseph. Joseph scolded, you rascal. Joseph at that time was extremely angry, looking at Claude, and scolded, how is that possible to say such weak words? Do you still consider yourself a knight of the secret tower? If you're still a man, you should become more resilient for others. At that time Joseph had not yet assembled the prosthetic arm. His face was extremely serious as he looked at Claude lying on the ground, even if you fall. You must grit your teeth and stand up again. Look at you now, look at that expression in your eyes and those 2 tears. Look what's going on. Joseph clenched his empty sleeve and said, now I have no choice but to retire. Give up your position as a knight of light. As my disciple you must understand the burden placed on your shoulders. At that time Joseph's face was very serious as he looked at Claude and shouted, your tears can help you protect the innocent people out there. Can you help protect the peace of Nuo Jin? Claude held his red cheeks and looked at Joseph, unable to take his eyes off. Joseph's voice was still serious. If you can't do it, then get up and continue practicing. Just like now, Claude stood looking at Greg sitting on the ground and said, if the Knights of the Secret Tower can't stand up at this critical moment, then who else can you entrust this Nuojin to? Claude clenched his fist and shouted, this has nothing to do with whether you are strong enough or not, or whether we can win or not. But at this moment we must stand up. Claude looked at Greg and asked, are you hiding here and crying just because you're scared? Can your tears help you defeat the powerful enemy out there? Claude looked at Greg very seriously and asked, thinking of those who fell, don't you feel ashamed of yourself? Greg shouted, I understand, brother. Greg stood up behind him and Claude lit up with a burning fire. In Greg's eyes there was a burning fire and said, for the reputation of the Knight of Light and the honorable work of Master Joseph. If there is anything I can do I will try my best. Claude also said with a fire in his eyes, you are right. We must continue to maintain this momentum. At this time the phone in Claude's pocket rang again. Claude took out the phone on Claude's phone note with Joseph as, the old bastard. Claude said, it's the teacher. After picking up the phone, Claude didn't wait for the other person to speak but shouted first, report to the teacher. The captain's disciple. Claude is ready for all battles. Please give me instructions. Not knowing what the other person said, Claude remained silent. Then, as if his momentum was extinguished, he said, okay. Greg's face in the back was angry and said, brother, I'm ready. What instructions did Master Joseph give? Claude was silent for a moment. Then Claude said, teacher said that these dream beasts are looking for death, and told us not to be too hasty. Just need to be well prepared to deal with the consequences. Quote, 2 figures stood silently under the rain without saying anything. The countryside scene was so rural. The raindrops were pattering. A sound of, Winston here was also bewildered when he heard the announcement and asked, "Did he really say that?" Tifa held the file and said to Winston, "Yes, Sir Winston. After we contacted Master Joseph. He asked for the location of the dream beasts, then we received this answer." Winston was a bit bewildered and asked, "He didn't say anything else?" Tifa shrugged and replied, "Didn't say." Winston scratched his chin thoughtfully and said, "When did this person become so confident?" However, it's actually very similar to his demeanor back then. At this moment, Winston's eyes flashed as he looked at the bright yellow light in the distance and asked, "Is the fortress destroying the star that fast?" But at this moment the golden light dazzled his eyes. He squinted slightly, but soon his other eye opened wide to see the golden light coming extremely fast. Winston screamed, "No, that's not the Star Effect Fortress. Who is that?" On this side, Andrew remained in the conference room. He slammed his hand on the table and scolded, "Damn it." Andrew's whole body trembled, thinking, White Wolf. This was initially just a small nuisance that could not pose any threat. But now it has turned into such a big problem that the fortress has to be activated to destroy the throne. Why? Just because of one wrong decision. I now have to pay such a painful price. Andrew was extremely angry, even if the Truth Association is not afraid of God-level threats. But that doesn't mean the Truth Association will easily deal with God-level ones. Let alone the current situation, because it came so suddenly. There was absolutely no preparation. Andrew stood near the window and the silhouette of the skeleton was reflected in. Andrew thought to himself, "I'm afraid Diamond has taken the opportunity to push all the responsibility onto me. Damn this chain of events completely. Not normal." Andrew's hand on the table was stained with red blood. He was still thinking. The ether monitoring array is malfunctioning. The name of the large tower formation has not yet been determined. Plus, before that they were concerned about the terrain structure of Nuo Jin can get used to it so easily. That's definitely not something a simple white wolf can grasp. Andrew stood there as if a dark shadow was falling on him. He thought, "I'm still steadfast in my original opinion. That bookstore must take on some mysterious role behind it. We found traces of Wild's magic in the abandoned White Wolf stronghold. The bookstore owner absolutely has some relationship with this only." Right now the virtual screen appeared before Andrew's eyes again with a red level warning. Andrew shouted, "Wait, what is that?" Andrew pressed the red button. The screen immediately illuminated the image of a yellow figure rushing from afar through the sky towards the god-level monster. Still on this side, the god-level monster was still standing tall and fearless. A golden light appeared from nowhere. Lin Ji rode on an eagle holding a sword. Lin Ji's eyes flashed glowing red. Hand holding the sword tightly. Lin Ji opened her eyes. The monster's eyes also flashed red light staring at Lin Ji riding the eagle. Lin Ji's hand holding the yellow sword tightly. He used all his strength to raise the sword and slashed hard at the monster's body. The golden light flew towards the monster's head. And its head was blown away by the golden light. The monster's axe fell. That golden light went through the monster's head. Waited for the golden light to dissipate. Only to see that the monster now no longer had a head. But only just the body. The monster's whole body has yellow lightning surrounding it. Something fell to the ground making a chipping sound. The monster's huge figure fell into the blood hole creating a powerful roar. The monster's body slowly disappeared. The light gold enveloped Lin Ji and the eagle. In that golden light there were pink lightning. Lin Ji's face in Candela's form was extremely clear. Lin Ji was silent. That stream of golden light shines down from the sky, creating the shadow of an eagle carrying Lin Ji on its back. The smoke and dust dissipates and everyone is standing there watching in bewilderment. Winston and Tifa and the others. The surrounding people were bewildered. Greg and Claude on this side were also sweating profusely and looked in bewilderment. Witnessing this majestic and mythical scene, everyone present was momentarily stunned and speechless. So, on the other side of the screen, Andrew also observed the situation through the virtual screen. His hand clutching the phone on his desk displayed the message, "This other hour," imprinted in the eyes of each of them. New message at 10:30. The proposal to launch the star-destroying fortress has been approved. He is the Spirit King, who radiates blinding light like the brilliant sun. Everyone looks towards eyes staring at the eagle carrying Lin Ji on his back. Lin Ji's eyes narrowed. Lin Ji's face appeared in the light extremely handsome. His appearance was like a god. The light shining down from the sky revealed two blurry silhouettes high above. Everyone below was watching in bewildered admiration. Winston, who was holding the phone, was also bewildered, and the person on the other side of the phone was also bewildered. Voice quickly asked, Captain, what should we do now? Should we continue? Winston moved his lips in silence. Then he firmly ordered, everyone stand in place and wait for orders. Act according to the initial arrangement. The person on the other end of the phone replied. The words, clear, Captain. Winston held the phone tightly in his hand and thought, the war still shows no signs of stopping. Winston ordered Tifa behind. Tifa maintain a state of alertness and fight, and at the same time contact the Truth Association to investigate this person's identity. Tifa replied, yes sir Winston. Winston raised his sword in defense, thinking in his heart, or is to say that this person suddenly appearing is the biggest danger. Considering the behavior just now, this person is very likely to be a dream beast. Winston raised his sword high and prepared to strike at any moment, not to mention the mighty power that this spirit just exuded. Simply from this scene, it looked like the presence of a legend of some ancient kingdom. The elemental king of the moon named Candela, who looked straight into the eyes of God and was the source of the great pestilence, who once lit a fire in the darkness to open a new land for his people. Although this legend had an ending very tragic, but that heroic and fearless spirit is still praised by everyone. But everyone knows that Candela, because that elemental king could no longer be revived. He committed suicide with his own sword on 10,000 years ago. His soul was wrapped around the sword with resentment and became a curse. Winston's eyes stared at the figure above, unable to take his eyes off, thinking, if Candela cannot be revived, so there is only one possibility that someone has awakened this ancient heroic spirit-level spirit. But to summon a spirit of this level, the medium that needs to be prepared will be. Winston's eyes were shocked, thinking, magic sword, that's right, that sword should be in Joseph's hand. Winston quickly took out his phone and shouted to the person on the other side of the phone. Hey Joseph, you. Joseph's voice on the other side was extremely calm coming from the phone. Hey old friend. Winston calmed down. Joseph's lips on this side moved saying, you old bastard. Joseph's eyes solemnly looked at the golden light and the wings and the figure up there. Joseph turned out to be standing on a ruined building. Joseph said, I saw it. Joseph held the phone in his hand, thought to himself. Divine light. Although I thought the bookstore owner would definitely take action, I didn't expect it to be so big. Joseph said to the person on the other side of the phone. I don't know what you're thinking. The magic sword was just handed over a few days ago. It was approved through the decision of the elders. Winston on this side gritted his teeth. Joseph said, you two, there's no need to doubt anything. My old friend, what I want to say is that I swear to you that King Candela is here. Joseph looked at the figure above and said, the words he told me for more than a decade, we have become very familiar with that. Winston on this side clutched his sword and shouted, hand over to whom? Joseph did not hide it and said, level 1 file number 0114. Owner of number 0113. Joseph said the name, Lin G. Boss Lin. So just now I said there is no need to rush like that. Winston's hand on this side was tightly clenched and silent. After a while Winston breathed out and asked, so what should we do now? Do you know what he will do next? How will he summon the Spirit King? At this moment, Winston saw something and shouted in panic. Wait, what does he want to do? Only saw Lin Ji sitting high above on an eagle. Golden air hovering. Lin Ji raised her sword high. The raised sword emitted pink light. Lin Ji's eyes above this guy looked in a certain direction as if preparing to fight. Tifa was on this side holding the phone. Hearing a warning voice coming from the phone, high energy reaction detected ahead. Tifa hurriedly shouted loudly, Star Destruction Fortress. Winston, who was on the phone here, was also startled and turned around. What? Winston stared at the pink light that was preparing to attack. The blonde shouted, has the Truth Association not cancelled yet? Was still on this side. Andrew said, shoot it. Andrew looked at the people in front of him and said, you still don't know? That thing that appeared in the dream is a dream beast. In other words, it must be our enemy. Quote. Only saw Andrew looking at the documents on the table that were the results of the dream beast assessment and at the dangerous level. A person with a hair as twisted as a noodle looked at Andrew and said, Vice President, I mean, is it possible? Another person also added, what about the possibility that the spirit is on our side? Then the man with curly hair had a file thrown hard at his head. His curly hair was in pain and he shouted, "Ah!" The whole group of people who were preparing to talk were stunned and didn't dare to move. Andrew's face was angry, pointing at the group of them and scolding. "Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Do you know what kind of existence a dream beast really is? When any creature is attacked it will feel pain, feel scared or reveal your shortcomings. But the beast won't feel that way." Andrew's hand was bleeding and fell to the ground, looking at curly hair being held up by blue hair and saying, similarly, "The fight between Dream Beast and Dream Beast has no such thing as justice. It's just weak. You know, therefore we can't stop attacking until it stops working completely. There is an existence more dangerous than last time, so why are you still hesitating?" Andrew's eyes widened with bloodshot eyes shouting, "Shoot the fortress." In the machine room, they were receiving missions. They were talking through the radio, number A3. Level 4 Armory Authority restart. A blonde girl was holding the radio to observe the situation. The picture of what everyone is doing says, Group 1 to Group 3 begin connecting to Ether Star Destroyer Fortress for the first time. Connection complete. Ether Star Destroyer Fortress begins countdown to launch. A giant machine appeared before my eyes. The female employee said, "Each part carries out level 1 orbital correction. The entire system converts to the combat system." The red button is pressed. Press down. Group 1 to Group 3 have successfully activated the Ether Star Destruction Fortress. The fortress is ready to raise and fire. All 3 system frames begin to store energy away from the target focal distance 0.1. Power supply system and normal operation. Complete equipment finally erased. All Ether Star Destruction Fortresses have entered the startup phase. On the computer screen observing latitude and coordinates, all units will begin entering data. Eventually the site correction is complete. The fortress began to light up. Yellow lights, the powerful fortress is about to fire. The energy storage is finally completed. The entire energy diversion system is completed. All programs are ready. The person in charge shouted loudly, "Shoot." The fortress carrying red sparks rushed extremely fast at the speed of light and flew towards Lin Ji, who was riding an eagle. Lin Ji on this side was silent and did not move. Then Lin Ji raised her sword properly, being opposed to that fortress. Lin Ji asked, "Are there still 2 stages or is it the crowd that is summoned?" Lin Ji's face was extremely calm and said, "Okay. Let's cut together." The other sword was raised to oppose the golden light that was shot. The golden light not only did not harm Lin Ji but was also hit back and it fell hard to the ground, making a loud noise. There was a loud explosion. Somewhere, a blonde man looked out at the rain and said, "The rain has stopped." A short figure wearing a blouse was sitting and examining a test tube and said, "Although even if the sky collapses, it's none of our business. You just do your duty first." The man behind smiled wryly and said, "You're right. This is the city center located in the middle of the area. The upper and lower areas are the areas established for research by the Truth Association. The entire city is in the center of the upper city. Even if the sky falls, the upper area should be left alone, put first." Although he said that, suddenly the blonde man was startled. His eyes widened. "Huh? What?" The man's mouth opened wide, looking at the phone and shouting. Something happened. The clay statue project factory reported an attack. Everything is gradually getting worse. The man in the blouse turned around in surprise. The head asked, "What did you say?" The blonde man said, "Someone has hacked into the reincarnation machinery. Factories numbered 01, 07 and 13 have all been destroyed." The man with hair watching the video clip on his phone. He said, "Forget the stored material and items. Even the 3rd batch of semi-completed homuncult and the newly refined batch of philosopher's stones were all there." The blonde man shouted, "We have to gather in a safe area as soon as possible. Factory number 07 is not far from here. If those unstable witch stones are detonated here will melt." The man in the white blouse also quickly said, "Mace, let's go this way. This direction is relatively fast." The two quickly walked down the stairs and said as they walked. Story. One of the two sighed, "Sigh. What a pity. These homuncults are the best batch we had so far." Mace was holding the suitcase and asked the other, "Rick, who do you think will attack us? Taking advantage of the fact that we put a lot of effort and attention into the newly released level 1 Dream Beasts. This timing is too accurate." Rick squatted on the ground and looked for the papers and said, "Don't worry, there's so much about it. You can make a decision for your superiors if you're still worried about it here." Rick, After finding the papers, said, let's go quickly. Later, if it really explodes, we'll really die. But before he could finish his sentence, there was a loud explosion above where the two of them were standing. And the two Ricks looked up. The sound of an explosion. Loudly. The bricks exploded and fell right in front of them. They were standing in the middle of the factory floor looking at the rocks falling from the air. Mace's face was cut without a single drop of blood. Rick was the same. The two of them stood there looking bewildered, not daring to move, only to see the rocks falling to the ground deeply with a popping sound. Mace's face turned pale. Her mouth opened wide and said, Mom. Damn, it's really exploding. Rick quickly ran ahead and shouted, why are you still standing there? On top of the house pillar, there was a lizard slowly crawling. The two of them quickly ran away. While Mace was running, the phone in her pocket made a ding sound. Mace quickly took out the phone and looked wide-eyed. Round. Mace stopped running. Rick turned around and asked, what's going on? Mace bewilderedly said, the Ether Star Destruction Fortress has been destroyed. Rick's deep-lensed eyes widened. Rick quickly ran to Mace's side looking at the phone and said, let's see. Only seen on the phone is the information sent at 10:45. On the message sent, attention all departments. The Ether Star Destruction Fortress has been destroyed. Enter immediately alert level 1 status. Level 0 personnel and above are not allowed to leave their positions arbitrarily. Level A and B personnel please move to a safe area as soon as possible. At 10:46. There was also an identical file sent. At 10:47 the same file. 3 files sent in a row made others confused. Rick asked confusedly, why must send this message 3 times? What do you want to emphasize? While Mace's hands were shaking equally. Mace said, didn't you see the message format in the factory instructions? Mace told Rich, for the same type of message. Each message can only be sent once. In other words, a total of 3 fortresses that destroyed the Ether Star just now have been destroyed. Quote, the scene was terrifyingly silent. The hallway where they stood was also shaking constantly. The two of them silently looked at each other. Mace said, the sky seemed to really collapse. Outside the factory, the fire lit up, creating a loud explosion. Yellow hair fluttering in the sky. The hand holding the sword was very serious. Lin Ji's eyes narrowed. Lin Ji sat on the eagle and asked, is this boss battle over yet? The eagle carried Lin Ji and flew over, then carried Lin Ji back, causing Lin Ji to cling tightly to it. Otherwise he would lose his life if he fell down. Lin Ji raised his sword high and said, no fun. Interesting, isn't this enemy's setup a bit weaker? It takes a second to level up before the fatal blow. Lin Ji swung her sword around and thought. But this mechanism is designed quite well. The mysterious enemy appearing at the last minute actually makes me caught up. It's mainly the opportunity to appear. So sudden. Lin Ji looked at her hands and one hand holding a sword and thought, in general. This VR game experience is quite realistic. Just lacking a bit of stimulation. Candela's physical instincts and his soul as a sword spirit. The combat felt like I had tutorial mode enabled. The difficulty was reduced by a ton. Lin Ji imagined herself and Candela standing in a space and 2 people standing one front one back. How can Candela then Lin Ji does that? Lin Ji thinks, in terms of actual experience even if I was AFK the whole time. The person who is actually playing is Candela and I just made some small guiding decisions. To put it precisely it's true that everything is played by Candela and Lin Ji is only the one who directs a few things. Lin Ji slightly lowered his face and said, although he kept giving off an intimidating aura that made me think I wouldn't be able to do it. After all, that's not the god that made Candela crazy after looking into his eyes. You mean after 10,000 years a new god appears? Right? Lin Ji looked at the trembling Candela sword and said in his heart, that's right. The day he was born was a great threat to my people. This time I will follow your advice and protect them with all my strength. Before they perish, I will challenge God once more. Facing our own past, we will use previous experiences to make up for the mistakes we made last year. Lin Ji was quite satisfied when Candela understood the problem and said, very good. I appreciate your attitude of accepting opinions and knowing how to correct mistakes. Lin Ji raised her sword and shouted, come, let's cut that god. Lin Ji rode the eagle and rushed towards the monster, slashing hard at it. Lin Ji consoled herself in her heart. It's okay, there's nothing to be afraid of. No matter what powerful character you see. It's just a dream. This is my dream, my imagination. I am invincible. Lin Ji looked at her sword that had killed the monster and thought, I think so. Lin Ji thought of herself holding a sword to confront the boss and then stabbing the boss to death with one sword. Turns out I was thinking too much. Look at the appearance of this boss. The big body, this makes people feel suffocated. However, the fighting power is only equal to 5 noodles. It's really a waste of such a good model. Lin Ji sighed. The sword emitted light. Pale yellow then emitted a stronger golden light. The sword said, it's over. Thank you for your help. The shadowy figure of Candela appeared in the middle of the sword saying, I have achieved my wish. And I have protected my people and land with my remaining strength. 1,000 years have passed and everything has gone with the wind. I can only do these things. Lin Ji looking at Candela silently without speaking. Candela continued, it's always easier to hide than to face it. Without your guidance, I'm afraid we will never be able to face the cowardice and despicableness in ourselves. Quote. Candela smiled. Tears spilled out of the corners of her eyes and said to Lin Ji, thank you. Lin Ji's eyes also flashed light at this time. Candela's whole body also slowly vanished. Lin Ji looked at Candela's vanishing arm thinking, is this really the end of the soul? Lin Ji in Candela's body also thought a little sadly. That's right, Candela died a long time ago. Only because his inner resentment and unwillingness wrapped around the sword made his soul he has not been destroyed for 10,000 years. Lin Ji's hand placed on the eagle's feathers. Thinking, he always told me that he would sacrifice everything to protect his country. That is truly a happy thing. Teacher Lin's magic to stimulate the appearance is truly very effective. It not only directly unties everyone's hearts, but also releases the demonic spirit attached to the sword. Lin Ji sighed and praised herself. You're quite human, Teacher Lin. Lin Ji raised Candela's hand in front of his face and thought. Even though he died, he was finally able to return to his homeland and country. This is probably the most beautiful ending for him before he completely disappeared. Quote. Candela's face smiled, waved to everyone standing below and said the 3 words, don't be polite. The light in the sky was still shining. A yellow color shaped like Candela and Lin Ji's soul within Candela disappeared, leaving only a pile of ruins. On the surface of the calm lake, now there were signs of movement. The water surface flowed evenly. Underneath the surface of the water bubbled emerged. Lin Ji stood in the water with a shadowy figure thinking, maybe the last dungeon was erased here. Overall it was a good ending, I did very well. It's just a pity I don't know what actually happened in the past. Lin Ji's face now looks like a sand painting. But don't let sand think to herself, if it was a story from my subconscious, creating something shouldn't leave behind regrets like this. Bubbles appeared, while Lin Ji was thinking. Someone's voice said, I'm sorry, King. Lin Ji turned her head to look in the direction of the source voice. Lin Ji saw in the distance several figures standing and saying, this is the only way we have to do. Lin Ji stood at the gate looking at the luxurious golden palace. The people below kept saying, if otherwise, we have absolutely no way to fight the dark forces. Others say, we have no choice. One person raised his voice and scolded loudly, damn it. How dare you? Candela asked all of them with a black face, do you want to see Elfers destroyed? Another person shouted, haven't you tried it already? Another person said, the depths of darkness is an existence that is completely impossible to resist. Another person also objected, didn't you fail too? In this palace, they were sitting and discussing politics, but countless voices of protest were continuously heard. Candela stood in the middle looking at them. Someone said, it's the same. It's better not to say anything. Another said, you don't even see him anymore. Candela pressed her lips tightly. Blood flowed out silently, trying not to speak. But the group of people still stepped forward and said, yes. What we are doing now is the only way to save the world. Take Elfers. Another person also continued, King. You should learn to trade to survive. Some sacrifices are necessary. We know your mercy, but. Candela stood there hearing them talk about all sorts of things, you see. They all volunteered to become test subjects for Elfers. A pair of legs were tied up with chain cuffs. There were countless goblins being tied up by countless tied up in chains. Someone said, someone can ask their thoughts. They also really want to devote their strength to the kingdom. A small child was also held in handcuffs. The doll clung to Candela's cloak. The other person asked, Do you want to betray their wishes? Chains were cut off. Candela shouted, enough. Candela's hand holding the sword trembled and said, you shouldn't go to the extent of using children as experiments. Right? Candela held the sword and turned away, saying, I will infiltrate the dark forces again. There is no need to say anything more. Darkness covered the silent scene. I held that baby in my arms. Now torn, lying on the ground, the cotton inside spilled out. Someone said, King, have you come back? You deceived me again. A person's legs placed on the barren land. Someone's voice said in a deep voice, I'm sorry. King, did you do this? Don't worry, don't blame yourself. You did a great job. Even Candela, sinking into the darkness, holding the sword, slowly walked towards the palace. The palace was now completely shattered. Blood was flowing. Someone's voice was still echoing, King, you are truly a good king. However, we are not good subjects. Candela's whole body was covered with wounds and dirt. Candela held the sword and looked at the person kneeling on the ground. The person kneeling on the ground said, I'm sorry for letting you see such a shameful face. The other person cried and said, but you are very kind. Will you accept our last request? In the dim darkness slowly revealed the silhouette of a giant ferocious monster. That giant monster had countless arms and legs and chunks of meat as big as a piece of a wide tree branch. Grew up. It turned out that those evil monsters had gradually turned into ferocious monsters. They begged Candela, please kill us. Blood poured onto the ground. Candela said, good. Candela raising his sword high. One sword slashed hard down on the monster's body. One could see that Candela's face was full of drops of blood. Blood splattered. Under the snow falling on the mountain. Snow falling all over the mountain face, making it difficult to move. Candela's whole body was covered in fresh blood. There were also puddles of snow in her hair. Candela walked with her sword on her hands, each toilsome step in the snow leaving deep footprints. Candela's chapped lips. Candela knelt down on the ground with his sword and said in an extremely sad voice, I am the last king of Elfers, Candela. I'm willing to give up anything for the protection of the witches who dwell here. Pair of blue pupils Candela opened and looked forward, saying, please protect my separated people. Please let them live. In the snowy sky, red eyes flashed, staring at the figure Candela was kneeling on the ground. Candela gave a satisfied smile. Countless black silhouettes gradually appeared around Candela. Candela raised her sword. Her eyes closed. Blood flowed everywhere. The darkness enveloped her again. Lin Ji opened her eyes. Startled and startled. A pair of hands covered Lin Ji's eyes. A pair of smooth white feet appeared on the snow. Her lips pink whispers in Lin Ji's ear, long time no see. Is a field of irises in the snow along with silver hair. She is the one covering Lin Ji's eyes. Lin Ji sits still. Lin Ji's head was placed on Silver's lap. Silver placed Lin Ji's head on her lap. She closed her eyes, her hand still gently covering Lin Ji's eyes. Lin Ji was covered by her eyes and said, yes, long time no see. He thought, soft. Lin Ji called her name, Silver. Silver blinked one eye and smiled and said to Lin Ji, bingo. Lin Ji lay on her lap and said, picture like I accidentally got lost in your dream. Because we are friends, why does it feel like you already planned it? To be more precise, you were caught in my dream. If you say yes, then yes it is. Silver said, who knows if I say this was a surprise for you. Would you like it? Lin Ji said, I will definitely like it very much. Silver closed his eyes and said to Lin Ji, I feel a big fluctuation. Can I know what you did in the previous dream scene when you came here? Your spirit is a bit more tired than before. Silver's eyes opened to look at Lin Ji and asked, what did you see just now? Lin Ji's eyes were still covered and he spoke. I have seen the past of a man who called himself a sinner. That was the last image that Lin Ji saw. Was King Candela kneeling on the snow and stabbed the sword through his chest. Hearing that, Silver said, he said he called himself a sinner. By saying that, do you think he's not like that? Lin Ji said again, that's just an idea. Just my personal opinion. I don't know all the hidden corners behind that story. Lin Ji's eyes opened in Silver's palm. He said, if you say it like that, it seems like you know the truth. Quote. Silver replied with a smile, I just knew it. How come? Do you want to hear it? Lin Ji heard that and thought to herself, it's over. I was careless. They are all existences in my subconscious. Why don't I know the truth? It's amazing that she is really proactively She is arousing that damn knowledge in my subconscious. However, this feeling is not bad. Listening to the beauty of my dreams recount her dusty past is also a kind of love. Fun. After thinking about it, Lin Ji said, if you want to talk, I'm ready to listen. Under a tall tree, one person lay down, the other sat leaning against the tree. Silver raised his voice to tell the story. This is the story. The truth about the transition between the second and third eras. When what Candela and Elfers had to face was an existence from the darkness. His power was so strong that everyone who saw seeing and touching him were all transformed. However, Elfers' sin was greater than cowardice and so was greed. Silver's monotonous voice told the story. They tried to master the power from catabolism. So they started doing experiments. Lin Ji heard that and asked again, experiments? Silver replied, that's right. It's an experiment. They need a lot of experimental samples to find a way to exploit this power. When there is no other way, not only innocent people but all citizens of the empire, I was treated like a lamb. Lin Ji's hands were placed together, gently rubbing his thumbs. He silently listened to Silver say. Silver raised his head to look at the snowy sky and said, however, in the end this power went beyond control and many Elfers people were catabolized. Silver's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, in the end, a certain king after trying to put an end to the origin of catabolism by killing failed gods. In the end, he can only raise his sword towards the subjects he once protected. Silver's hands covered Lin Ji's eyes. Her breasts were near his head. She said, so the people who are truly crazy, not Candela. But those people, Candela, who has been awake all this time, how painful it must have been to kill them with his own sword. Lin Ji said again, no matter what. The king who massacred his people and country was a madman from any point of view. Lin Ji placed his hand on Silver's hand and said, that kingdom and people are gone. In the past, even Candela's own soul was gone forever. The sins of the people of this country were ultimately borne by their king. How tragic it is, said Lin Ji. The Candela's exile was his obsession surrounding that holy sword that killed him. The person who exiled him for so many years was actually himself. In Lin Ji's voice seems a bit regretful for a lifetime saying, being the king of a country but not being able to protect his land and people is his sin. He does not wish to atone for his mistakes. Hey, I don't feel like I can do that myself. But instead make me willing to endure endless torture. Silver eyes opened sparklingly. She said, regardless of whether he has crazy or not. No one can exonerate him now. No one is willing to believe it. This historical moment has soon been turned into ashes and has no chance to be cleared. It's white, dug into the Candela sword lying next to it emitting light. Lin Ji praised, he is a good king. At least I will always remember. Silver finger placed on the seal on Lin Ji's hand. She spoke, that's why he gave the seal to you. Looking up from below, you could clearly see Silver's huge breasts. She was saying, this is the symbol of the elemental king. Moreover, he voluntarily gave it to you. In fact, it was like he gave the military position to you. If you can find the remaining Elfers immigrants, perhaps they will be willing to give it to you. I want to make you king. Lin Ji heard that and waved his hand in refusal. Forget it, I'm just an ordinary bookstore owner. Managing books is fine, but managing people, I don't want to. It doesn't end with Candela. Silver smiled and closed her eyes and said, I know you're lazy. Suddenly she opened her eyes, then she said to Lin Ji with a regretful voice, this dream is about to disappear. It's a pity, but tonight there is no other choice but to break up here. She took the hand covering her eyes away from Lin Ji's eyes. When Lin Ji opened her eyes, he saw the scene before eyes. His eyes opened wide, only seeing the light shining on the white snow before their eyes. Silver said, let's witness all of this together. This is the final result that elemental lord used all his strength to protect. The two of them sat on the snowy ground, looking at the golden light shining down on the scene. All the flowers were blooming. The lavish palace was illuminated by light and brilliantly. This land has existed for tens of thousands of years from before until now. It is still as prosperous as Brocade.